everyone. In just a second, I'm going to be introducing author Mark Shaw, and we're going to be talking about his newest book, Courage in the Face of Evil. And I always have to read the titles because I always want to make sure I get them right. Anyway, his book came out last week, and this is such a good book. It's reminiscent of Night and Viktor Frankl's book, and it's about concentration camp, and it's told in the story from first person of a real woman. They changed her name because her family didn't want her name known, but it is crazy good. Hard to read sometimes, but it's like one of those things where I couldn't stop turning the pages to see what was going to happen to her next. And I can't wait to talk to him. This is the second time I'm talking to him. And everyone, here is Mark Shaw.
Hi, everyone. I am so excited today because I'm speaking with author Mark Shaw, and we are talking about his brand new book that's coming out today. It's called Courage in the Face of Evil. And this is the second time I've talked to Mark. The first time was last year when we talked about the reporter who knew too much, Dorothy Kilgallen's story. And I could not wait to read this book. And Mark, I never put it down. I opened it, and then I never put it down. Okay?
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you so much. It's a very disturbing story, but it's a very inspirational story.
Very inspirational. And you know what? I was getting, you get frustrated. I compare this book to Viktor Frankl and Night and, those other books about concentration camps and World War II. But what I loved about this one was that the hope that she projected in it, like throughout it. And I was like, oh my gosh, like, because it was about a woman, and she was German, and her name. Now, here's my question. So VERA KONIG is a real person, right?
No, Verna, we changed the name there. And,
okay.
We did so for certain reasons that were necessary here.
Okay.
But that is a real person. I mean, it's a real person. It's just a different
It's a real
name.
person, just different name. Okay. So, the thing is that you have such detailed accounts of what was going on. And it was horrifying, of course, because it is horrifying. But the way that she survived, I was like, I couldn't take another page, and then I couldn't stop myself from turning another page. I was like, oh my gosh, if anything else happens to her, I'm not going to be able to deal with this.
Well, the Holocaust is a disturbing subject, and it's a tough subject for people to read aloud or know about because there's so much cruelty involved. But Vera, the woman in the book, she was a German Christian woman, a nurse. And she wasn't a Jewish person, but she was arrested in Berlin for passing out leaflets and hiding some of the Jews and things like that. She wanted to be a doctor, and so she just couldn't help it really bothered her about all the suffering and everything. So she ends up at Ravensbrück concentration camp, which was about 50 miles north of Berlin. And it was the only concentration camp specifically designed for women during the war. In fact, it was constructed 80 years ago this November, actually just before the war started. So it's interesting. Himmler was the one who had the idea for it. And so one of the things we know is that even before the war started, they had the inclination to go ahead and separate these people. And, of course, in this concentration camp, there were Germans, there were asocials, there were prostitutes and Jehovah's Witnesses and Russians and everybody from everywhere, because they just picked up any women that they could and put them through a kind of a bogus type of trial and then sent them there to be there for the rest of the war. So, it's a story about hope. You're right, and Vera was right there. So this is based on a Holocaust diary that I found. It's authentic. I got it from her daughter, this woman's daughter. And so the words are Vera's. It's in her voice. I wanted that to happen. I changed very little in the diary at all because I wanted her voice to shine through.
Well, it really did. I mean, and I kept thinking that when I was reading it. I was like, the details, I was like, he's doing so well with her voice throughout the whole thing and her thoughts and her, I loved getting in her head about this.
Yeah.
Because like I said, there are other books that it's like they were written about it and then it's kind of like about, you know what I mean? Like it's kind of a little bit distant. This was right there in her head as different things were happening. The details are so like.
Well, you're very, very perceptive there, because as you may remember, when we did talk about the reporter who knew too much, I'm an author who likes primary sources, not speculation or this person told that person or whatever it is. And in Dorothy Kilgallen's book, you know, a lot of that book is in her voice through her columns and articles and all of that. She was truly a woman of courage. But with Vera, you know, I was so fortunate to be able to find the exact diary that she kept. And people may wonder, how could this happen? How could a woman keep a diary during the horrors of the Holocaust? And there are a number of books, a number of accounts out there, but the way that they did it mostly was to scratch their words on little pieces of paper and things like that. Sometimes they sewed them into the hems of their dresses, or they kept them in floorboards, under floorboards and in closets and things like that. And yet a lot of these Holocaust diaries you know, survived. And that's great, because then we have a real feeling about history here as to what happened, and we have an authentic account. We don't have somebody just saying, hey, this is what I heard happened. It comes straight from Vera's voice.
Yeah, and, you know, like I said, how much she took and how much, but what always was amazing about her, and I found myself doing this morning, and to myself, this is what I learned from books, is that no matter what would happen, she would sometimes get mad at God. She prayed a lot, okay? She really, really prayed a lot, I mean, which is just amazing. But no matter what happened, she saw something that she would thank God for, okay? Now, whether you thank God, you know, whatever religion you are, okay, the point is that in every little detail, she could find something, you know, and it would seem horrific. And then she would say, but, you know, thank God I was at this place, or I was at this building when this happened, or I was, you know, put on kind of duty. And what she went through when she was put in prison in the camp, I couldn't, you know, I couldn't even imagine it. And yet even then she was finding things like, you know, the smallest thing, like the smallest kindness from anyone, a smile, somebody's look in their eye. You know what I mean?
Yeah, well, she was a true angel of mercy, because she was a nurse, and when she got to the camps, that's where they put her in a clinic to try to help people. And the first part of the book is really tells about the horrors of Ravensbrück. I mean, there was so much cruelty there and all of that, and she has so much trouble with that, watching it, especially with the children and with the Jews and with all of that. And you really see in her mind, you know, how disturbed she is. She cries an awful lot. She is a Christian woman, and she talks to God, and she says, you know, I need miracles, and I need to get through this, and somehow or another. It's interesting, you know, and we have to remember, you know, we look at things that happen in our lives, and we think they are just insurmountable, the trouble that we may have. But when human survival is at stake, when death is a reality every single day, then you can imagine just trying to find any hope whatsoever that's there. And so the little things that she would pick up where she could help somebody with, you know, remember when she finds out that there's no medicine for anybody in this one clinic, and so she races over to another clinic, and she argues with this very evil marshal, you know, the woman who's running that clinic, and the woman yells at her and everything, but she's so steadfast in her belief she has to help everybody that she finally is able to get some medicinal supplies and take them back to her clinic. So, you know, you're right, and that's very perceptive of you, and that's what kept a lot of these women going, is that there was some way or another they were going to survive. They were not going to let those Nazis be able to end their life, and as soon as they could possibly do it, they were going to help save other lives as well.
Yeah, and it kind of takes me back to Viktor Frankl's book when he was talking about, like, you know, they could control everything but our minds. And I felt like when I was reading this, it was like she controlled her mind. That's how she survived, because she controlled her thoughts.
right.
You know?
She was a very strong woman, and I think that came from her background. She was a very strong woman. And, Frankel's book is so fascinating in many ways because he had the same mindset. They just were not going to let the Nazis roll over them. And with Vera as well, she just had so much agony when she saw children being abused and children being hurt, children working too long and children not being fed and all of that. And as you know, she got to a point where she just didn't have a lot of hope. And then that event happened where some little Russian girls were brought over to her clinic. And one of them, as you know, she just took to, as she said, like a daughter I never had, little Andrea. And this little girl was an orphan. And her mother had been exterminated. Her father was missing. And, here was, one person that she could help individually. And so she took to that little girl. And as you know then, there was the scare when the Nazis decided to investigate and look at all of the different clinics and camps and the barracks and everything and track down anybody who wasn't German, little girls, whatever they might be, and then transport those non-German children out of that camp to probably Auschwitz or where they would have been, they would have been exterminated. And so this was her chance, to be able to save just one life like that. And as you know, she took that seriously and did everything she could to save the little girl.
Yeah, and it was like that gave her a purpose. It gave her a mission.
Exactly.
That no matter
yes.
what they, no matter what she was going through, as long as she knew that she was okay, it was like, okay, fine, another day. Fine, it'll be another day. Like she went through her, like I said, an unbelievable, incomprehensible. Like I just, couldn't leave this book down. After I got done reading it, I just carried it with me because, like I said, we have our everyday complaints. Okay, we have our everyday inconveniences, as you would say. But
I hope a lot of young people will read it because for young people these days, a bad day is when they can't use their smartphone for 5 hours. So,
right.
I've been told that some high schools now actually have a class about the Holocaust. But as you know, this book is really, my reason for publishing it was to show that love can overcome hate.
Yeah.
And in this day and age, with the division in our country and all of the disrespect and the hate and the cruelty and all of that, I wanted to publish a story where people could read it and say, hey, the Nazis were the enemy, and poor Vera was, wrongly imprisoned like so many others were and all of that. But as you know, when little Andrea, she hides her from the Nazis and everyone for a long time there, but then she gets in trouble herself, and she is caught giving food to the Jews and the Gypsies and all those people, and so now she faces a beating and going to jail herself. And as you know, for a number of months, a Nazi prison guard named Jacob had showed her some affection, showed her some caring. At first she hated him. At one point she said she wanted to kill him and all of that. But over the period of time she started to learn more about him. He explained that he was only in the army and guard because they threatened to kill his family. And so I'm not so bad, he said. And she started to kind of believe him. And when she faced the question of what to be able to do with little Andrea while she was going to be in the jail and after the beating, I'm not going to spoil the story for people, but they will find out that the hate that she had actually turned more to love, and she ended up trusting this German prison guard with helping her hide little Andrea. And it's not too much to give away the fact that he agreed to do so. At one point she said it's the worst night of her life. She told him about the little girl, and she was afraid they were both going to be shot, she and the little girl. And then this prison guard, Jacob, and his friend Reinhardt both decide they will help her, and they take her to a pig farm and hide her for the rest of the war. Well, that's certainly love overcoming hate because, it shows that all of those German soldiers were not so evil, that they did have a heart full of love. You just had to find it. And that's what she did. She found that heart of love, and then he's able to save the little girl. And I'm not going to spoil what happens during the rest of the war and after the war, but it's a very inspiring story because people can look at that and say, you know, there's somebody that I detest or somebody that I hate, and we use those words too much these days. And yet, you know, maybe if I try to figure out a way to be able to learn more about this person and their viewpoint and why they act like they do and all of that, there may be a real breakthrough there possibly with figuring out that that person may not be quite as bad as you think they are, whether it's the leader of our country or other people that you deal with on a daily basis, that there's good in everybody. And that's what really is the theme of the book.
Yeah. I mean, and I've read so many good stories lately about German boys that were drug into, you know, that they didn't agree. But when you're in, you know, but from her perspective, when she sees these soldiers and what they're doing to everybody in the camp, it took her a while to figure out that he wasn't as participating and he wasn't as, you know, as mean and you know, but it took a while for her to understand that he could possibly be there not wanting to be there, you know, like he had no other choice. And, you know, which I love.
Yeah, well, and
I love seeing that
and
too.
it does take a while because you're going to have to decide in your own mind this person you have such distrust for or hatred towards or whatever it may be, that it's not going to just happen overnight. You're going to have to try to reach out if you can, and many times, I've found out, at least in my own life at times, that if you have a real disagreement with somebody, if you just right away say, listen, if I did something wrong, I apologize. Even though you know in your own heart you don't think you did, if you just say, look, if I did something that really offended you or caused you problems, or in this kind of a situation with Vera, you know, just looking deeper into this man, because the longer she was around him, the more she realized that he wasn't as evil as she thought he was. So in our daily lives, we can do that too. We can reach out to people. We can, you know, I think there's way too little respect in the world these days. People can differ as to their opinions and politics, whatever religion, whatever it is. But if you can somehow or another come around to saying, look, I'm going to turn this negative into a positive if I can. Now, a lot of times it may not work. Let's look at Vera's situation. It could have easily happened that he was tricking her, as she says one night. Maybe he tricked me. Maybe he's going to turn me in and the little girl, and they're going to take us to the death wall and shoot us both. And so, you know, that could have happened here. And there's such a dramatic scene you may remember when she's supposed to hand off the little girl to Jacob along the prison wall, and the lights are flashing around, and she still, when she's out there, doesn't know whether he's going to actually take Andrea and help her, or he's going to take them right to the death wall and somebody's going to shoot them both. So there was no guarantee that what she was trying to do with having love overcome hate was going to work, but she decided to take a chance, and that's what most people ought to do. Because, again, as I say, there's way too much hatred in the world today.
Right. And you know what I love about that, too, is that, you know, when you read stories like this, you understand that the Nazis really didn't win everything at that, because they did, you know, those people were, you know, in the kindest, like the smallest, kindest acts, you know, for whatever they would do for each other. It was like they couldn't break that human spirit, you know, that we're going to, like you said before, like, you know, we're going to survive. Okay. And, you know, when she had so many choices, like there were so many times that, you know, she could have made a different choice to save her own life. And she was like, okay, well, I guess I could die. You know, I could die. It could happen. I could get caught. I could get caught giving somebody medicine. I could get caught giving somebody food. She always knew the risk, but it didn't stop her, you know?
No, and again, I just applaud your perceptiveness, and you know, you're seeing right into what I had in mind with this book. And so far, the response, there have been some people who have criticized her, for instance, with collaborating with the enemy, which is what she did here, and that's understandable if that's how they want to look at it. But if you put yourself in Vera's position, what other choice did she have? There was no way that she was going to continue to hide little Andrea under floorboards and in closets and everywhere else. Nobody else could take care of Andrea. She had taken on that responsibility, and I think she believed that the good Lord had brought Jacob along, that there could be no other reason why he had hung around the barracks, and how they had broken down some of the hatred that was there on her part and all of that. So there's no coincidences in life. I don't believe in fate or anything. I just believe there's some spirit that does these things, and Jacob was brought along in that situation to help this little girl, to save one life. And you know, you have to think about that the title is Courage in the Face of Evil. Certainly Vera exhibited that. So did Jacob. So did Reinhardt, the other prison guard, and so did little Andrea. And so they all were had such courage because they all risked their lives with regard to what happened. And, you know, it's just amazing when you think about it, how there were really 4 lives that were transformed. And on Jacob's end, this was a way for him to be able to feel like that somehow or another he was doing some good when he had to ally himself with these terrible Nazi killers and what they were doing with experiments in the camp and all of that. So it gave him a little bit of a reason to live as well, and to have hope that perhaps he could survive the war too. So there's a lot going on here with all of those people.
Yeah, and what I loved, there was a local guy here. He's no longer with us, but he served in World War II, and he was part of the rescuing of the concentration camps. Yeah, I'm not sure which one, because he's, you know, when I was younger, I never thought to ask him, which I wish I would have asked him more, but, you know, that's just the way it is. But he did he would come and speak at our schools and stuff, and he told us that when they would arrive at these concentration camps, that the prison guards started to put on the prisoners' clothes to get saved, but they knew that they weren't prisoners because they had meat on them, because they were, you know, because there was the prisoners, and then they looked too healthy, basically, so they couldn't hide, you know, so it was very easy for them to pick, you know, but the way you described, and this isn't a giveaway because everybody knows what happened, but, you know, the way you described it, though, of how they went in to save them at the end, and, you know, that was dead on with the stories that he told of what happened.
Oh, good.
You know,
good.
Dead on. I mean, you know, because they wanted to just feed everyone. I mean, that's what they desired, but they realized that people were dying when they would feed them, because they would, like, eat, I don't know, I guess you eat too fast or something. Their body was just too far gone. They had to be very careful. Those people that served, you know, as guards and commandants at those camps and everything, they did everything they could toward the end of the war to be able to somehow or another lessen the guilt they had, perhaps, but also save their own lives, because they knew there were going to be war crimes trials and all of that. I'm glad you brought that up, because you may remember that there's one very, very special thing that happens after Andrea is safely at that pig farm and being taken care of. The inmates, I guess we could call them, with Vera, decide they'd like to have a Christmas party for the kids. And this is as the war is winding down, and they're hearing that the Russians and the Americans are coming and all of that. And so they decide to organize a Christmas party. Well, they go to this woman named Vince, who is a true character in the book, and she was the worst of the worst in terms of the commandants and guards and all of that. And they just decided they'd ask if they could have a Christmas party, because otherwise they might have been found out and discovered, and there could have been some violence or whatever. So they go to her. Well, she said okay. And they were kind of surprised, but they weren't, because she knew that perhaps doing something like that might lessen her culpability when the Allies came. And as you remember, it's an extraordinary event. A lot of the women, make ornaments, and then they have games, and they have things that they do during this party, and they do get some food that they can find and all of that. And then she says, you can't imagine hearing children from 23 different countries singing Silent Night. Yeah.
I mean, you've got to visualize it. I just had a chill saying that, because you just got to visualize what that meant. Here are all these little kids who have somehow or another survived, and they're having a Christmas party, and there's some cheer there, and there's some smiles on their faces, and all of that going on. And, that's what I hope people will take from the book. Everybody knows about all of the cruelty and the terrible things that happen, and it's all in there. But there's several situations where, people like Vera and the other friends that she had, Elizabeth and some of her friends, they help out each other, and they help out the gypsies and the Jews. At one point, there's supposed to be no treatment of the Jews anymore. That comes down from the Nazi hierarchy, and yet Elizabeth and Vera and Gerda and some of her friends are never going to let that happen. They are going to treat those Jews if it costs them their lives. And so there's just so many good feelings about what was going on there, deep in the heart, of course, of all of the suffering.
Right. And, right, exactly. And the part that I just loved was when the nurses like her, the medics, they call them, when they would skimp on their own food, to give a dying person food, that they knew was more hungry than they were. If we could even imagine that, like, if you really imagine, like, these people are starving, they don't have food to give away, and yet they're willing to give half of whatever they get. And half of whatever medicines that, like at some point she was suffering from her own ailments, and she would give away her medicine that she would get. And it was just, that's why it's like, to me, it was like such a book that you kind of carry with you afterwards and say, you know what, I can do better. I can do better. And we're not faced with those kind of things per se, but we can still do better. We can still do better.
Well, we live in such a materialistic world, and we all want things, and we all, but we also want to help other people and all of that kind of thing. But this type of courage from Vera and her friends there, and the prison guards and others there. I mean, sure, in The Reporter Who Knew Too Much, I talk about Dorothy Kilgallen's courage. She risked her life to discover the truth about the JFK assassination. It ended up costing her life. But with Vera and those people that are in the book, that's a different kind of courage, a more powerful type of courage. I don't even want to compare them very much because on a life or death daily basis, they were trying to just survive. And yet, in light of that, you just made such a good point, because they're trying to survive, and one way to do so would be to eat all of the food that you have, which is a very scarce amount anyway, turnip soup and potato peelings and things like that. At least you would go ahead and eat that so you could survive. But what do? They give it to other people, or they share it with other people, or whatever it may be. There's just so many good lessons to be learned from that kind of conduct, that kind of feeling for others.
Yeah. Yeah, what a powerful book, let me tell you. And, I highly recommend it for everybody. I mean, I'm a homeschooling mom. I would use this book. I studied World War II with my son this year, and we read different books. But I would definitely add this to, my list of books to recommend and, to learn a lot about it, because I love reading stories about people, and I think it teaches us things. And, this is such a good book, Mark. I mean, like I said, I couldn't put it down. I was afraid to turn the page, and then I had to, because I just wanted it to be okay for her, and but it always was. And that's the thing. I'm going to read right before I let you go. I want to read the last paragraph of your prologue, because I think this kind of sums it up for the book. She says, "Oh, how my faith is tested tonight. Where are you, God? Prayer is all I have, and I want to believe a miracle will occur, but maybe all the miracles have been used up and there are none left." But as we know, she didn't give up on prayer, and she prayed every day, and, and prayed for everyone every day. That is one thing she didn't give up. And I believe, after reading books like this and studying World War II, and I want to see if you feel the same way, but the people who survived, I feel like, are the ones who didn't give up hope. They just didn't they just realized that was the one thing they could have, and they just weren't willing to give it up. They knew that there was going to be an end. They knew that somehow, justice was going to be served, and so they hung on to that.
Yeah, I think so. And, there's a little departure from my bestseller, The Reporter Who Knew Too Much, and some of my other books, but there's a common theme there. And it is about a hope. People having hope and going the extra mile to be able to try to do what's right and for the truth and for justice and for all of that. And I think that you'll be able to see in the book when the people read it that her tone in terms of what's happening in the camp changes a bit, maybe 2/3 of the way through, where she does hear that Hitler may be losing the war. Because up until then, all they were told was all the propaganda that the Nazis were winning the war, and they were going to, she says at one point, they're going to kill every Jew in the world, and all of that. But finally, there's that little glimmer of hope. Somebody from outside comes to the camp and gets her the information that he may be losing the war, this terrible man. And it does give her that glimmer of hope. And I'm so proud to be able to tell her story, and I thank you so much again for your kind words about the book. Hopefully people will read this and share it with their young people, because there's a lot of lessons to be learned.
Yeah, it really is. And I'm so blessed that I got to meet you and read your books. I really, really feel blessed by that, and I can't wait till we talk again with at the end of the year when The Reporter Who Knew Too Much comes out with more. I can't wait to talk to you about that. But in the meantime, everyone, this book is going to be out there right now, and I'm going to have the Amazon link and all of Mark's links, his website. Everything is going to be listed underneath this talk, and just thank you so much, Mark.
Well,
it's been my pleasure.
Thank you. I'm the blessed one here, so thank you so much.
Then we'll talk soon, okay?
All right.
Okay.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Have a great day. Bye-bye.
You too. Bye-bye.
Listening, everyone. Do you see now why I love talking to him so much? I love picking his brain, and I learned even more from talking to him than I did reading the book, and that's kind of why I do this, so that I can ask all my questions. And you know what? And he's so nice enough that he just answers them for me, and he's really nice about it too. So everyone, thank you. All of Mark's links will be listed underneath here. Go to his website. He's got a great website, and the link to the Amazon book will be right underneath here. Courage in the Face of Evil. I'm going to make sure I got it right. Courage in the Face of Evil. Go get it, everyone.